Welcome back to the One and Only podcast. This month, we've reached the month of June already. I cannot believe we are 6 months through 2024. Glenn, very quickly, a high and a low point for the last month.
High and a low. The low point has to be I shouldn't say the Cumberland show, but all the guys had to enter the brownie competition, and I made. They were awesome brownies. I thought they were
self-proclaimed awesome.
Yeah,
brownies.
But they were judged on the Friday night, but I brought them on the Saturday morning. I missed the whole.
You missed the judging.
And I mean, the judges missed out in judging my brownies.
They did.
So.
The people's winner for me was Temps. He put a lot of work into that.
He did.
Three batches of brownies we've had through this office.
And they were very good.
They were very good. And he got 6th, apparently.
6th?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't even get into the competition.
Exactly.
But there's always next year. Always next year.
There is. And a high point? Any high points?
Well, the high point, the Cumberland, I really enjoyed Cumberland show. It was really good. It really felt like a county show, wasn't it? It was, yeah, a lot of people. Weather turned out really nice. Isaac's finished exams. He's finished his nationals, isn't it?
So it's in 4th year?
4th year.
Okay, cool.
So he's finished all that, which was really good. We're looking forward to the results of that. And we'll feel.
We're looking forward to that. Is he looking forward to it?
I think
so.
Is he
pretty happy with how he did?
Yeah, I think so.
Good.
And yeah, we've had a few nice nights, believe it or not, down at the lakes. They've been last weekend was nice, but it's been hard getting nice nights.
Oh,
the weather's been difficult, but no. Since the last podcast, it's been good. We're just getting into show season now, so it's
We are getting into show season. We've already been to Northumberland show. That was probably one of the low points for me actually, because I've never been to Northumberland show, and I thought I'll go as to see a different show, and literally bless them. It rained all day or the week up to it, and the ruts were like 3 feet deep. Everything was being towed in and towed out. And to be honest, it is a testament to how resilient farmers are, because they were just cracking on with it.
Northumberland show is really, it's a good show.
It's a lovely show.
Yeah, I didn't realise it was as bad as that.
It was really, and it was such a shame because it was so rutted like that. Even to go for a walk around, the place was a mess. So even to walk around, me and Carlisle went for a walk in the afternoon, and it wasn't even enjoyable to walk because you were skating everywhere. And
it's too bad. It's a whole year of work goes into it. But yeah, I think you enjoyed it though. Other than that,
it was nice. Yeah, we saw lots of people. Lots of people came onto our stand, and then we obviously had the Cumberland show last weekend. Midweek we had Scott Sheep.
Did you go to that?
No, I wasn't at Scott Sheep, but Scott was at it. Talked about halal, and it made the Scottish farmer, and people were being a little bit controversial in the comments. But
I really enjoyed this piece. Yeah. It was really good.
That was really good. And now we're here, back recording again for the one and only.
Who do we have today?
Today, we're talking on the theme of the Genny Lec.
Oh, yes.
The Genny Lec. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. I'm looking for. I've never actually. I'm not very politically savvy with all this stuff, so.
Neither am I.
Yeah, but we'll
see what. So we asked all the parties, Conservatives, Labour, Greens, all of them guys, and the only people that have come back to us are
Reform. Did you ask Reform?
No, I didn't. I don't know.
What about the guy? You know the guy who wears the funny hat. Is it the Raving Looney Party? Did you ask them?
No, I didn't.
They might have fit in quite well.
They might, yeah. Well, you get on like I
okay.
So we've got John Stevenson coming in. So I don't know whether I'm excited or nervous, because I to be honest, I don't really follow politics, because I think to me, as a naive person that I am, when it comes to politics, I don't know how much value they really hold to the.
Well, maybe we can find out why we're not really.
Why we don't value them.
Why we're disconnected. Maybe it's us.
True.
Let's find out.
Let's get into it.
So, hi everyone. This month's podcast is a general election special, and we've invited all of the candidates, but thankfully John turned up. So, thanks for coming, John.
Not at all. Delighted to be here.
Would have been a bit of a lonely blether between us, wouldn't it?
It would have been, and especially when we don't know a lot about politics, it mightn't have been a very good general election special. So, John, this may be, you might get a lot of different questions than you're normally used to getting. So, tell us a little bit about you and about your background and your history and how you got involved with politics.
Originally from Aberdeen, the Granite City. I grew up there, was educated at school there. And then I went off to Dundee University and studied history and politics. So therefore that's where a lot of the interest comes from. My father was a local councillor at the time when I was growing up as well. So politics was part of the household discussions then. And then after my time at University of Dundee, I came south and studied law at Chester Law College. And after Law College, I did my training across in Newcastle, did a little bit of travelling, and then arrived in Carlisle in 1992, 32 years ago. Wow. And put down roots, married a local, and helped build a local business here.
A law firm?
That's a law firm, solicitor's practice here. And then got involved in local politics. I was a councillor on Carlisle City Council for 11 years. And then in 2010, put myself forward as the candidate for Carlisle and was elected. So the first Conservative in nearly 50 years.
Wow. So it was a Labour before that, or Liberal?
It had traditionally been a Labour seat. But I think Carlisle was a changing city, different time. 2010, the country was going in a different direction. But also I think Carlisle was starting to change. It had been quite a unionised city for many years. And I think that had undoubtedly changed, and it's continued to change as the city has developed. But so politics, I suppose, was there from quite a young age.
Interest.
Yeah. I think that's often the case with most people that get involved in politics, that it's either some sort of family history to it all, or they've got interested in it at a young age.
Have you, so over that period of time, has your political points of view or your political, has that changed over time, or have you always been are you conservative at heart, or where does your That's
a really interesting question, because the traditional answer is when you're young, you tend to be of left with politics, and as you get older, you drift to the right. So I should be some sort of rabid right-winger by now. But that's not the case. I think my politics has been fairly centralist throughout my time. I'm primarily probably a conservative because I believe in the sort of economic arguments that are put forward by the centre-right. Believe in a market economy, competition, thinking that drives up standards and keeps the prices down and is better for the economy in the country overall. And I think that's where my politics primarily lies. But yes, I suppose I would call myself, if somebody said, where are you in the Conservative Party, I would say it's very much the centre of the Conservative Party.
And for someone who's not, I'm not totally engaged with politics, but
you represent the vast majority of the population,
which
is probably a healthy thing. Actually.
And I want to get into that a little bit about why that is. But looking at your party seems quite a divided party. There seems to be your middle ground conservative, but there seems to be, I don't know if extreme is the right word, but it feels like there's a party that's pulling in opposite directions. So how can that be an efficient way to run a country with the party going, or maybe that's a healthy thing?
Well, I mean, in our political system, because we have what we call first past the post election system, you tend to find that the big parties are in fact coalitions. Well, say in say France or Germany or some continental countries, what you would have is a government with, say, several parties in it that all reflect slightly different views, but are on the left or the right of politics.
For me, that's quite a bit healthier, I think. But is the Conservative Party really four different parties?
Well, it's a coalition of different views, but they're broadly on the same right. And the Labour Party is exactly the same. They have their extreme left wing, their left wing, and their what you would call their more moderate wing. And that is the nature of our political system. But it does give, or tends to give, greater stability in government, because you get one party elected. Yes, it's a coalition, but it is one party that's sort of coalescing around a programme. Well, if you look at the continent, you find, for example, countries like Belgium.
Countries like
countries like Belgium, where they've taken months to produce a government. Holland is experiencing exactly the same right now, where they're taking months before they're coming up with a government. So there are advantages and disadvantages of both political systems. People sometimes think PR is the solution for everything. It is not.
There's probably not one perfect system. I suppose democracy maybe isn't the perfect system.
Well, I think Winston Churchill famously said, "All systems are poor. Just the democracy is the best of them all."
Yeah.
So I'm going to side with Glyn on this one in terms of my naivety in the political landscape, and that's speaking as someone of a younger generation. And maybe, my parents, my grandparents, things like that might have taken a more of an interest than I do. Why do you think there is so much of a disconnect now from the generations coming through to politics and what the government stands for in our society?
I would suspect if we were sitting here 30, 40 years ago, you'd say exactly the same comments. Yes, I think there's always this argument, the younger generation are not interested. I disagree, actually. They might be interested in different ways, and it might not be strictly party political, but they are interested in the issues. And I think that's healthy and good. And I think it's important that all generations take an active interest in politics. But I think if you went back in time, you'd discover that the younger generation are exactly the same as today's. I think social media, though, has changed the dynamics of politics. And I think where there's a danger is you tend to find a little bit of an echo chamber now, that people listen to people who have a similar view.
Yeah.
Which I think is dangerous. Well, in the past, I believe there's been more of an awareness of different views, and therefore you still make your own judgment, but you do hear different points of view expressed in a positive or a negative way.
So how do you balance that? How do you make sure that you are approachable and accessible to all generations, but all levels of interest in what you're doing? Yes, I totally take your point on everyone has an interest in certain matters because they all affect people in different ways. So how, as a candidate, how are you trying to sort of portray your party and you as a person to all?
There was different mediums. I mean, at its most basic, it is knocking on somebody's door and introducing yourself. It's putting leaflets through a door. It's obviously getting on programs, podcasts like this, or being interviewed by the radio or local television, and then there's things in print as well, articles, etc. So it's a variety of ways of doing so. And politics is partly about local, which is what I'm involved with here and fighting for the Carlisle seat, and partly about what the national politicians are doing. So there's two elements to it. This is the national politics and the local politics. But there are different mediums of getting in contact with people. Facebook's the modern way. When I started in 2010, the great ambition was to be in the Friday Cumberland News. That was the important one. Then by then 2015, it was you had to have emails, and today it's Instagram and Facebook.
Yes.
So it's interesting how politics changes. But by the same token, we still deliver leaflets through the door, and that's still an important way of communicating with people.
You still see value in that?
Yes, absolutely.
And you get a lot of nice conversations on doorsteps and.
We have lots of interesting
conversations. Interesting ones, I should say, yeah.
Yes, I mean, most people are incredibly polite, even if they have a difference of opinion with you and don't want to support you.
So what's your area that you're canvassing for? What is that? Mostly Carlisle. How does that look like? Is it rural? Is it mostly? What's the demographic there?
The constituency that I'm fighting the present election on has changed slightly. It's primarily Carlisle, the city, with the exception of the Dalston area, and then it goes up to the Scottish border and out to the Northumbria border. Okay. So as a landmass, it's quite a large
big area.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And it's, I would say, 1/3 rural, 2/3 urban as a broad.
So Longtown.
Yes, Longtown, yeah. Brampton, up to Roadhead, places Penton, and out to Gilsland.
Yeah. So there's quite a varied demographic of people with different issues and challenges to think about.
But actually, that's what makes it a really interesting constituency. I have some colleagues and friends who represent sort of suburbia or purely rural or very urban. Well, up here, I think it's a much more interesting area to represent because you have the dynamics of the rural environment, the business environment, the urban, and all those sort of aspects that go with it. So it's a fascinating place to represent.
So let's take the city of Carlisle. What's the main issue or challenge that people want?
Well, I think
how like for example, NHS hospital in Carlisle. How do you think that's performing?
Well, at one level, good, in the sense that we've seen some capital investment into the hospital. We've got a new cancer unit. There's an endoscopy unit being built as we speak. The cardiac unit's doubled in size. But there are undoubtedly challenges with regards to the queues that there are with waiting for operations and appointments, etc. But the real prize for this area is the fact that the University of Cumbria will open a medical school next year. And I think that's
in Carlisle.
In Carlisle, I think that's a real game changer for us in the health economy.
So it'll take another years. Will that be in the old hospital?
Initially, yes.
Initially, yes.
Okay. As you know, there's long-term plans for the university to actually move into the city centre, around the citadels, and I think ultimately the medical school will probably move there.
And the medical school, is that going to specialise in any special or just general medical?
General, it'll have 50 students every year. So in 5 years, it'll start to be turning them out, and hopefully some of them will want to stay, put down roots here, and practice locally, which I think would be hugely beneficial.
But going back to the NHS, so you've been in government since 2000, not government, you've been in MP since 2010, and the Conservatives have been in power since 2010. So how do you feel when the NHS waiting lists and surely that doesn't make you feel?
Well, clearly you don't want long waiting lists at all. I think it's partly been caused by the pandemic, which has had a major consequence for a variety of public services. The local strikes that we've got with the junior doctors hasn't helped either. But there are challenges within the National Health Service. I think there have been for many, many years, and there will continue to be. I think it's how we operate the NHS, how we deliver the services, that's something that has got to be looked at by the next government.
At the last election, Boris promised 14 new hospitals in the UK. How many?
I can't give you the exact stats.
How many have been delivered?
I think 6 have been built,
Six.
And there are some in the pipeline. Up here, we didn't get a new hospital, but we did get a new cancer unit, so that's a significant investment.
And I suppose, I know it's not your area, but we did get a new hospital in Dumfries and Galloway. But I think that was prior to that announcement.
Just for the benefit of people that are perhaps listening and don't understand maybe your role as a candidate and what you do if you're elected and things like that. Can you just maybe explain
that'll be interesting.
that role?
What the role of what an MP actually does?
Yes, because I think people see it as
that's a great question.
He's an MP, and that's really what, and they think you should know what that is. And I think there's a lot of people out there that maybe perhaps don't know what an MP does or what his purpose is.
You're absolutely right, and it's an interesting question actually. I always say to people there's 2 aspects to the job. So the main part of the job is actually to go to Westminster, represent your part of the country, and hold whatever government there is there to account, and to pass legislation. That is the fundamental part of our job.
You're lawmakers.
We are a lawmaker. I've never actually been a member of the government, so I've always been a backbencher, and I am primarily a legislator. And we scrutinise legislation and we pass it. But there is also the element of holding the government to account and assessing what they are doing, and we have things called select committees. And I've sat on 3 select committees over the time I've been a member of Parliament.
What were they?
One was the Scottish Select Committee, one was Local Government Select Committee, and the more recent one was the Constitutional Affairs Select Committee, which follow, and they all follow an individual department. So the Treasury would follow the Treasury, Foreign Affairs follows Foreign Affairs, and mine followed effectively what you would call the Prime Minister's department, what they call the Cabinet Office. So that's the primary role of a Member of Parliament. But I think people often see it as being the local advocate and the person who turns up at local events.
And waves. And
that's, you could say, the other part of the job, which is actually being in the community, being in the place that you represent, turning up to events, meeting people for a variety of issues, and very importantly, having surgeries where people come and see you and they've got their own individual problems that you try and resolve.
How often do they take place?
The way I've done it is always usually by appointment. So they're on a steady sort of a rotation of appointments, and people will ring up and we will make an appointment for them to come in.
And what does the commitment look like in Westminster? I'm intrigued to know as to if you were elected an MP, what's the commitment? How often do you meet? How often do you go down there? How does that work?
Monday mornings, or early afternoon, whatever, depending what's going on here. You get on the train, you go down to London, Parliament sits on Monday afternoon. It finishes at 10 o'clock at night on Mondays.
10 o'clock at night?
Yes.
And
if we have votes, it can go on till 11, 12 o'clock at night.
Wow, I did not know that.
And then on the Tuesday, we start at 11:30 in the morning and we finish at 7 at night. And the same on Wednesdays.
So is there a reason for that?
Well, traditionally, they always used to finish at 10 o'clock at night, and over time they want to be a bit more family orientated, so they started to reduce the lateness of our finishes. But even at 7 o'clock there will be other events on, there'll be other meetings going on.
7 o'clock's quite a late finish anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's the nature. The rhythm of Parliament is very different.
So that's Tuesday, and then what happens?
Keep good at milking cows.
Three times a day. If it doesn't work out, give us a call.
And Wednesdays are similar to Tuesdays. Then Thursdays you have finish at 5, although there's less parliamentary government activity on Thursdays. And Fridays was what we call private members' bills, and that only happens every so often. And that's where a backbench MP can bring forward a bill. They rarely become law, but sometimes they do. And that's an opportunity for a group of backbenchers or an individual to bring forward legislation that they would like to see happen.
So that's 5 days a week, every week?
Yes, although to be fair, I'm usually back up here on a Thursday.
You come back up here. So it's pretty much 4 days of your working
and
weeks
then,
down there.
And then Fridays is what I would call constituency day.
So that's how you spend it in your own
area. Own patch.
And what sort of support, like, do you have? You have an office to run here. You've obviously an office to run in Westminster. So you obviously need a team for that to all happen. Is there a team, or is it just you?
Yes, every MP is allocated a budget.
Yeah.
The budget is so they can have an office, and we have an office within the parliamentary estate as well. Every MP has a office there, and then you have certain numbers of staff. Now you can choose whether they're all in the constituency or if you have them based in London. I have one member of staff in London, and the rest of the staff are based up here, because I think that that's where most of the parliamentary MP work happens, because it's about helping people locally and dealing with correspondence. And
so they help you collate all those opinions?
Yes, and they will organise the meetings, the visits,
and bring it all to you?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. That seems like a good way of doing it.
Well, my staff member in London tends to help when I'm down there with the diary and meeting people in London, the meetings that you'll have there, and anything that relates to parliamentary activity.
This is new ground for me. I didn't really know how.
Quite surprised at that. And then when
it is interesting, because a lot of people don't really realise what a member of Parliament
does. Hours for.
And then Prime Ministers.
But you're not always in the chamber. You're doing other things.
No, I get that.
But the Parliament is actually sitting.
I think it's just maybe because the media are very, they're a force of their own in this country, aren't they?
They are.
And whatever perception they want to perceive is the perception that you get to see, isn't it? So sometimes it's difficult to understand reliably what an MP does, because they're so fixated on certain stories or certain individuals, and that's what fills the media, and you don't actually see the work that they actually do.
Well, I think the best description is the chamber, because the media focuses on half an hour every Wednesday, PMQs.
That's every Wednesday.
Every Wednesday, 12 o'clock, you have PMQs, and that's the big set piece of the week.
Yeah.
But an awful lot of activity goes on out with that. And you can have maybe 30 people in the chamber having a very worthwhile debate, and both sides are very polite to each other and complimentary each other, because you forget there's an awful lot of activity that goes on where we're working together.
Yeah.
Well, PMQs gives this impression that we're at each other's throats all the time, which is just not the case.
I want to ask this question because, like, if our kids behave like that, like Prime Minister's question time, it's really bizarre to behave like that. Like, so one guy's trying to talk, and you're like, and there's guys waving white paper. Whoa, whoa, whoa! Order! I mean.
Yeah,
it's bizarre.
But interestingly enough, if you go abroad, they love our PMQs.
Oh, I know, but you guys are lawmakers, and
that is the scrutiny element of Parliament. Yeah. The lawmaking bit is separate when you're going through.
And the media only focus on one side.
I mean, we on bill committees, you go through an Act of Parliament line by line by line, can be incredibly boring at times as well. But they actually go through it line by line, and then there's amendments brought forward, and there's a debate about particular amendments, and that is how law is made. And that is the primary purpose of Parliament.
Yeah.
But
which people forget.
Yeah, but every day there's questions on each individual department. So on, say, a Tuesday, there might be Treasury. So the Chancellor will be there and the Shadow Chancellor will ask questions and backbenchers have an opportunity.
And I suppose that's why your profession really lends itself to being a good MP. Like
So the legal background.
The legal background.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, across the House of Commons on both sides, there are a lot who have had legal training. Yeah. But I think it's dangerous to have one profession. I think the important thing about Parliament is to have a real mixture, different backgrounds, different experiences, different careers. I think that's so important.
And has that changed? Maybe not over your time, but like if you go back to the 30s, has that demographic of MPs changed over the over time?
And not necessarily, in my view, for the best. I think you've started to see more and more MPs who have had political backgrounds rather than alternative careers, life experience. I think there's maybe a good thing, a bad thing, but there tends to be more graduates, while in the past you might have had different people with different backgrounds as well, educational backgrounds, that is.
I definitely think that would be beneficial to have spent a time of your life
doing something completely
different.
Doing
something and then bring that sort of business experience or life experience into it. I think that's...
And I think that's one danger for our Parliament, that we've moved towards careerists. Completely. You'll always have some, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think you've got to get the balance.
So, being obviously the nature of our business that hosts this podcast, I guess we should touch on your thoughts, the challenges maybe that are put to you from the rural and agricultural communities. What are the challenges that you are hearing from the region that you stand for?
Well, it's interesting. Although I've represented primarily an urban place up to date, what we must never lose sight of, Carlisle is very dependent on the rural economy as well. Good example is here.
Yes.
The H&H Mart. You know, my profession, accountancy, surveyors, bankers, you know, some of the other companies locally are very much dependent on the rural economy. So I think they're interwoven, and I think it's really important locally that we recognise that they have their strengths and they've got their challenges as well. I think from a national perspective, I'm a little bit concerned that we're drifted away from the fundamental thing about farming, which is food production.
Yes, that's good to hear.
And I just think, you know, environmental, important, completely recognise that. But I just think there's a little bit of a danger that we've drifted away from recognising how important food security is. And if there was two things that I think any government's got to be very careful about and be very vigilant about is energy security and food security. And we, I think, have let ourselves slide a little bit on both. I think we're starting to, on the energy side, I think embracing nuclear, I think, is hugely important, because I think that gives us a base supply and a security of supply.
I was having the same conversation with my son last night, more or less word for word, what you said. And that's great to hear, but it doesn't reflect what the Conservative government have done, John.
I think there's a recognition that we have to move back to, take energy security first. I think there's now a greater move back towards building nuclear plants, what we call the SMRs. Prospects for Cumbria, I think, are really good. We could end up with SMRs on the west coast, possibly even some of them being built on Kingmore Park. But I think we've got to be careful about that, because we've discovered with Ukraine just how important energy security is. But also going on to food security, we are about 60% self-sufficient, which I think is way too low. Because if there was an international crisis with regards to food, every country would become very defensive. And therefore you've got a risk. So I think somehow we've got to return to looking at how we ensure that our food production actually increases rather than decreases.
So how today's policies do not reflect your... I
think they're starting to change. For example, people were starting to build solar farms in some of the best land in the country.
And trees, you go down to like Lowther Estates. I mean, the amount of fabulous farmland that's being taken out of food production because of government policy is scary. Not scary, it's really, really disappointing.
I think that's, you could argue, one of the unintended consequences of some policies, but I think there's a recognition now that actually we've got to look back at food production as being very significant, very important.
Priority of that because it's okay saying, yeah, we're going to go back on, we maybe need to revert to our old ways and maybe not have so much focus on environmental and things like that, and remember our food production, get that balance back again. But the case with farming is once you take productive land out or you incentivise something else, once you're out of it, it is nigh on impossible to get back into that. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I fear that maybe if we let it go any further, they're going to have an extremely difficult job to bring that back and increase your, as I totally agree with you, that 60% up to a better and a more secure level.
I think it should be a priority of the next government. I really do, both energy security and food security. And we're living in a far more uncertain world. You've seen us starting to increase expenditure on defence, but along with defence comes those other two issues as well. But I think it's getting the balance between environmental laws and environmental requirements and what we want to see as a society, and also making sure that we can produce food to pay for our to feed our population.
You've obviously launched your, or not you, but the party launched the manifesto today.
Yes.
Does that opinion, your opinion there, is that reflected in the manifesto?
It only went out at 11:30 this morning, so I haven't had a chance to digest it all. I've only seen the headlines on it of it all. So that'll probably be some of the detail.
Well, probably since Brexit.
But I think we were already moving in that direction before this election.
Because since Brexit, one of the things that's really affected all the sectors within agriculture is clarity, and there hasn't been any clarity. And everything in farming is they're long-term projects, everything's, and that lack of clarity has really affected businesses and farmers' sense of direction. So I think if anything comes out of this, whether you get in power, whoever comes in power, I think the agricultural sector needs complete clarity, not just for the next 2 years, but like long term, for them to really make plans to go forward.
I would say two things there. Firstly, to a certain extent, we actually don't want it to be a party political issue. You want a consensus because it's such an important sector for our, the well-being of our country. But the second thing is, I always think you shouldn't underestimate the resilience and the entrepreneurialness of farmers and their ability to adapt.
But we don't want to take it for granted either.
I completely get that, but don't underestimate that skill set either. Yeah. They can be very versatile. They can be very adaptive, and can be very successful. So we shouldn't underestimate their ability to get on and deal with the environment that they live in. But I do agree, any business, whether it be farming or manufacturing or services, likes clarity, likes certainty. And that's absolutely right.
And as you've said there, that I think the key point is that it is an extensive business we thrive in. The agricultural sector is an intensive business. There's, there is few industries like it in that, they need, a cycle of a cow even to get her to, a breeding level is 3 years. That's a 3-year commitment alone to get a cow that's going to be a breeding animal, isn't it? That's not that you can't just decide something this year and then change it next year, because that means absolutely,
you're absolutely right. But you could argue it's exactly the same. Well, not exactly the same, but a manufacturing plant, they've got to invest as well for the long term. So you're right, you're absolutely right, and that is why the farming industry needs certainty, needs clarity, and needs consistency.
I think some trust and support.
I think people are willing. People will take the risk, but it's those policies where you don't realise the impact it makes, and they need to be done very carefully. But
the other mistake I think policymakers can make, they look at the number of people employed directly by agriculture, which is actually very, very small. But what they don't, they don't realise that it feeds into all the industries we have here in Carlisle, but then it also feeds into the food chain and the manufacturers. So the whole chain from farm to fork, as they like to say, is very significant. I mean, I've in Parliament been very involved with the food and drink manufacturing sector. Obviously, Carlisle's a significant manufacturing centre, and it's the largest manufacturing sector in the country. Lots of people would never realise that, but that centre,
I never realised that. That's incredible.
It employs more people than any other manufacturing sector in the country, but it's relevant to the farming sector as well.
I think farming as well, and its related industries that you just touched on there. We hosted an event here, didn't we, in March, a careers event to highlight the options available to young people. Young people from the ages of 14 and above. All were invited from Cumbria, South West Scotland, and right up to Lanarkshire. A government-led funded initiative to highlight those job opportunities and career paths out with being a farmer. So that's your food technologists, that's your nutritionists, that's your vets, accountants,
lawyers,
solicitors, all that type of thing. And it was great, wasn't it? It was, the kids were really engaging, and they were really actually quite surprised, because the narrative around a farmer is, yeah, 30 or 40 years ago, it was a lifestyle. It was everyone had 3 cows in the back garden, all that kind of stuff. They're hugely thought of pressured businessmen now, that their business is a food production business, and that there's loads of opportunity there.
I think there were nearly 500 kids came to that event, and a lot of them were like, I didn't really like this. This is
it's really interesting, because I've done a Carlisle Skills Fair in Carlisle for the last 10 years, and bringing sort of training providers, businesses and students to come along and see what's on offer. And they've always been surprised at what we have to offer in Carlisle. So I'm not in the least bit surprised that they come along to your event and going, oh wow, you can do this, you can do that.
And it's funny,
and because it was really good initiative.
There was a surprise on both sides though. All of the businesses that were here, so for instance, our neighbours there just up the road, Carlisle, Billington, said, yeah, we offer apprenticeships for nutritionists and technologists and all that kind of stuff throughout their quite large business every year. And it's just trying to get that across and get that out to people and get that out to schools and get that out to further education, that we have those opportunities. It's just said it's so difficult because there isn't an outlet for you to
if you're successful on the 4th of July, John, maybe that's could we meet up again and try to do something?
I mean, it's interesting. I've long wanted Carlisle to expand and grow as an entity, as a city, believing that's how you get prosperity. And the key ingredients are investment, infrastructure, skills, absolutely vital. So what you're doing, I think, is really important.
Yeah, because once those skills leave the county and leave
very hard to get
very difficult to pull them back, isn't it? Yes. And there's lots of bright lights of here, there, and everywhere, or even abroad is attractive to many, and maybe they just don't realise what's there on their doorstep for them.
But one of the mistakes governments of all colours have made over the years is they want skills, but they forget that it's skills that are relevant to a particular locality. So Carlisle, Cumbria economy requires certain skill sets. So we know what we need, and therefore we've got to make sure.
That's difficult for a national government, though.
It is. That's why they need to decentralise the skill sector.
One of I think your slogan for the last election was "Get Brexit Done," but in many ways, I feel we've been done by Brexit, and I say that purely from the business that we're in, and I voted for Brexit. Rightly or wrongly, but we have a massive. Our business trades with Northern Ireland and the whole of Ireland backwards and forwards immensely. But that's really that ability to trade back and forwards has been really damaged. How are you going to fix that, John?
Well, funnily enough, I was on the other side of the argument. I was a Remainer. Believing on
I wish you had it. I mean, I voted wrong. I mean,
well, no, you didn't. You voted the way you thought was right at the moment, and the way that I did. And I'm a firm believer that at the end of the day, we live in a democracy, and I lost the argument, but this country decided that they wanted Brexit, and I think we've got to respect that. Well, we should respect it because we live in a democracy. But what we've got to do, though, is take the opportunities that Brexit offers, as well as accepting there are certain challenges. And you've demonstrated by what you've just said that that's one of the challenges, making sure that we have as frictionless trade as we possibly can. We have the opportunity with trade agreements with other countries across the globe. And I think it's 2025, there's another opportunity to go back to the EU and have a discussion with them as to what is the future trading relationship between us and the European Union. So there's an opportunity then to maybe look at some of these issues.
But it seems Northern Ireland's part of United Kingdom on paper, but in practice they're no longer part of the United Kingdom. So that's a very serious. You're part of the
Constitutional Affairs Committee.
Yeah. So that fact, I mean that does not sit really well with me. That's all.
Some in Ireland feel they've got the best of all worlds.
No, they do, they do. But I mean, I think if there was real serious thought put into it, it could be solved quite quickly.
Well, the Windsor Agreement did go some way to resolving some of the issues that there were between the two.
Not within the agricultural sector, not within that. But were you aware of those sort of problems with
those barriers that we have?
Those barriers?
There are some certain barriers that I'm aware of for your sector and indeed some of the other sectors. And it's about breaking down those barriers, because you've always got to remember it's advantageous for Europe as much as for us to have this frictionless trade between the two, because we're a big market for many European businesses, as is Europe's a big market for us. But we shouldn't also lose sight of the fact that the fastest growing part of the world is not Europe. It is Southeast Asia, South America, places like that. And we've got to make sure that we trade with them as effectively as we do with our near neighbours.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, but I just feel there's a massive amount of frustration. I think it's with that trade with livestock back and forward. I think it's not really. I don't think that the voice has been listened to.
What you're saying, it's not working as well as it should do.
No, and yeah, so that would be nice.
One of the priorities that we should be looking at for your sector.
And it's really small fry in the big picture, but it's not for the people that it affects.
No. And there's a lot of people actually, directly and indirectly, that affects. Definitely.
The horse industry was affected exactly the same way, but it was solved very, very quickly. And I feel very frustrated. Like there was obviously people that are involved in the horse industry at a certain level that have the ear of certain politicians, and it got sorted. But it feels like the livestock sector has been left behind from that point of view.
Well, that should be one of the priorities for the new ministers in DEFRA after the election.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Good. So, what's your feeling, John, for the next few weeks? Like, just keep Mr. Sunak hidden behind the wall somewhere. Don't let him.
I think that's unfair on him, because I think he's very articulate, very hard-working, very able individual, and I think he's done a lot for the country. I'm obviously very supportive of him. He'll fight at the sort of national level, the political debate that's at that level, and I've obviously got to do my bit at the local level and articulate my view of where I think Carlisle can go and the sort of borders area, and support him at where he thinks we can take the nation as a whole.
What makes you, there's one little question there when you were mentioning that, what makes you want to stand up, above the trenches, so to say,
and get shot at?
Yeah, because that is what happens, isn't it? That is naturally what happens in any whether you become, when you progress in management in a business or anything like that, the more senior you become, the more problems and shots that you take, unfortunately. That's just comes with it. What makes you want
people like shooting at politicians in particular, I get that.
What makes you want to put yourself in that position?
Well, I mean, people, I sometimes get, one of my great disappointments is when you go out and campaign, at the end of the day, 35%, 40% of the people of Carlisle, of this country, will not actually vote. Right. And we actually, a democracy is a really important part of our...
They won't vote.
They won't vote. It's amazing when you think about across the world the number of people who would love to live in a free society, who would love to have a democratic choice as to who.
I
don't realise how lucky they are.
Yes, exactly. And I think we sometimes forget how fortunate we are to have been born in Britain, and that those freedoms can be fragile, and therefore it's incumbent upon people to put forward their view and argue their case. And I would encourage people to go out and vote, because that's a small contribution to the democratic.
That's a great point, because on the 4th of July, on the 5th of July, there'll be whether there's a change or not, but there's going to be a change.
Well, there'll be a new government.
There's going to be a new government, and that will take place without bloodshed, without violence, but we take that for granted, and in a lot of places of the world that does not happen. So really, everybody vote.
Yeah, you must vote. Well, that's always been, I don't know how you bring your kids up, Glenn, but certainly the way I was brought up, that my parents were always just like, if you don't vote, then unfortunately you don't have any voice.
Right, you don't.
You
have no right to have any opinion on anything because you haven't taken your.
I've always voted on everything. Sometimes, I regret the Brexit. The way
but at least you voted.
I really regret the way I voted for Brexit. I mean, but anyway, I always vote.
So no, we forget that we are very lucky in the freedoms that we have. We have the freedom to complain, freedom to shout at each other, and know there won't be any repercussions.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why I think social media, we've got to be very careful about social media, because I think that there's dangers within social media that people just think it's all right to criticise somebody in a very unpleasant way. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with criticism and there's nothing wrong with challenge and etc. But I think you've got to be careful where the line is. And that's a sad thing I feel in politics. And I always remember getting in a lift in London, and there was these two female Labour politicians speaking, and they were talking about the social abuse that they were getting, and I thought, that's dreadful. And I thought it must come from my side of the political debate, and it was their own side. And I just thought, how appalling. Yeah. It was just so unnecessary.
But that media, that platform, you would never speak to people like that face to face.
Absolutely not.
If
you'd like to think not.
You'd like to think not.
I don't think you would.
No, because people, But that's one of the challenges. But
so I guess as we kind of wrap this things up, is there any points you want to summarise as an outlet for this? Will be published on the 20th of June. So it'll be just.
Well, I'd encourage everybody to vote John Stevenson.
Well, yes. Well, naturally you have to say that, don't you?
The 4th of July happens to be my birthday.
Well, wow.
Independence Day.
But what can they expect? If someone's listening in your constituency, what are they expect? What are you setting out for them?
The simple thing is, I've been an MP for 14 years, so I have a record to defend. I think it's a good one. We've got a lot of investment coming into the city. You see it with the Ring Road. You see it with the station refurbishment. The university going into the city centre. The interesting thing for me, if I get re-elected, is the fact that I've now got a larger rural element, which I think is exciting. So I would say, look at my record, and I believe I can continue that and help to improve both the urban part, but equally as importantly, the rural part of the new constituency.
Wish you all the best, John. And also, if you are successful, I would really like to get together on the on that careers day and
skills.
Do something.
Absolutely, and it's a good sort of a mix with the one I already do. So I'd be delighted to get involved in that.
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to vote for you. I live in Dublin, Galloway. You're
Well, interesting enough, I once got interviewed by a local paper, and my wife was in the room, and she said, I don't vote for him. and the next day the headline was, MP's wife doesn't vote for him. But we lived in a different constituency.
Fantastic. That's really good.
Thank you very much, John, for giving up your time.
Lovely.
I totally appreciate this. Is a busy time, but we really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very enjoyable.
Perfect. What a conversation that was.
Interesting, huh?
Yeah, I naively did not know the role of an MP, and I feel a little bit silly for saying that, but I think there's a lot of people didn't actually realise what the role of an MP is, what they do. I
didn't really have any idea. I'm quite surprised. 10 o'clock on a Monday evening, 7 o'clock on a
12
Tuesday.
12 till 10 on a Monday.
Yeah, it's so they spend a lot. Yeah, I always thought they were local. But really, their time is spent in Westminster, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, if I'm being totally honest, I just thought they pop down to Westminster once a week and then faffed about the rest of the week.
But John came across very, very pleasant guy. He's obviously done a lot for the local area.
Very approachable. Very, very approachable without being a little bit, because sometimes politicians can be a wee bit brash and a wee bit sort of vote for me.
No, it wasn't. No,
it wasn't like that at all. Wasn't like that at all. And yeah, no, we touched on some pretty interesting subjects.
He did answer most. We didn't really give many difficult questions, really, because I don't find that pleasant watching that when I watch. But no. Yeah, we had a good little chat. I suppose there's other things that we could have pressed him on, but I find it more interesting just finding out about the role of an MP and yeah.
I think he's open and honest and said about the change in his area that he covers now, and that he's never really had that third of rural to take into account now. And going forward, if he is re-elected, he recognises that, and he'll have a certain proportion that he has to focus on. That.
His views on food security was very encouraging, actually.
Very encouraging, very worrying at both levels, because if he thinks that, then how are we at where we are?
It doesn't really fall in line with what the government policies, but hopefully there's more people like him start to address that. And energy and food, I mean, they're two huge things that we are in a very precarious situation with in this country. But if he sees it, he's obviously got the ear of the people who matter. Maybe not on the 5th of July anymore, if there's going to be a change. But
yeah, if he doesn't get re-elected on the 5th of July, forget this whole conversation.
Anyway, it's too bad. Too bad the other guys didn't come.
Well, yeah, next month we'll be able to say, hey, we had the new MP
Hopefully
in last month. Or we'll be like, he was a nice guy. God, he didn't get re-elected.
I enjoyed that.
Anyway, as always, thank you very much for listening to the One and Only podcast. In the meantime, if you've got any ideas, guests, subjects, topics that you'd like Glenn and I to cover, or guests that you'd like on the podcast, please do get in touch with one of us or the team at anyone at H&H, or through any of our social medias. We would love to hear from you. And please like, share, subscribe, tell everyone you know.
Yeah.
He's been Glenn Lucas.
You've been Laura Millar.
And this has been The One and Only.
Thanks for watching, guys.